Where are some of the highest chances to get permanent residency? Northern Territory is one of those areas, or the complete state for that matter. Because of the lack of skills and movement to that particular state, it can actually lead to pathways of permanent residency a lot sooner than you think. Because of the demand there, and because it's so centrally located in Australia, and it being close to potentially Asia, if you live in Darwin, which is the capital of Northern Territory, it can be quite beneficial for you. So, we're going to talk about the General Skilled Migration Subclass 190 and 491, particularly for Northern Territory. So, what is the General Skilled Migration? It's essentially where the government, or in this state, the state-nominated visas, the two visas that we're going to talk about, the government can invite you to apply within the state. Now, each of these visas have different criteria, but we're going to look at the overarching criteria, then followed by the particular criteria or streams available for the Subclass 190 and 491 within Northern Territory. So, what do you need to be able to be eligible to apply for an expression of interest through the Skill Select program? That's essentially where Northern Territory can view that you're interested in coming to Northern Territory. You've shown your expression of interest by lodging an application, but they can choose to invite you. So to apply for an expression of interest, you need to be under 45 years old, have a positive skills assessment in one of the occupations that is eligible for Northern Territory, have the relevant English language proficiency, that is having at least competent English, unless otherwise specified by the assessing or licensing authority or registration body, where you might need a higher level. Now, this is covered under the Northern Territory Migration Occupation List. Then have a minimum of 65 points, but that doesn't mean it will ensure that you get an invitation. The higher the points are, the more likely you are to be invited. So if you're already living in Australia, here's what you need to know. You can't be living interstate to be eligible for an invitation. If you or your dependents are on a student visa and haven't studied in Northern Territory, you're not eligible for Northern Territory nomination either. If you've been nominated for the Subclass 489 or 491 visa previously by Northern Territory, you're not eligible to be invited for the Subclass 190 pathway, which is the more preferred pathway, as it's permanent residency directly, and it doesn't have the condition of regional work. Although all of Northern Territory is technically considered regional, so you can work even in Darwin, which is the capital of Northern Territory. Now, additional requirements for onshore applicants. So if you're a Northern Territory graduate, for the Subclass 190, international student graduates can be eligible if you completed at least 2 years of full-time study in Northern Territory, you lived in Northern Territory for at least 6 months after completing your qualification, holding a graduate visa, or also known as the TR, or a bridging visa. You can show genuine efforts to secure employment in your nominated occupation or a related field in Northern Territory. So these points need to be covered if you're a graduate. Now, if you're an international student, for the Subclass 491, you can qualify if you've completed at least 2 years of study in Northern Territory and show genuine efforts and progress towards securing an employment in nominated occupations related to your field in Northern Territory. So that's the graduate pathway. Now let's talk about the Northern Territory residence pathway. So if you are a resident of Northern Territory and want to apply for the Subclass 190, you can be eligible if you've lived in Northern Territory for at least 2 consecutive years before applying, demonstrate that none of your migrating dependents are residing in any other part of Australia, you've had a full-time employment in your nominated or related occupation for at least 2 years, and the position is expected to last for at least another 12 months. So it's an ongoing position for at least 12 months. Now, if it's for the 491 pathway and you're a Northern Territory resident, then you must have lived in Northern Territory for at least 12 consecutive months, demonstrate that none of your migrating dependents are residing in any other part of Australia, you've had a full-time employment in your nominated occupation or a related occupation for at least 6 consecutive months, with the position lasting for at least another 12 months. So the criteria for the 491 for both the streams, the graduate stream and the Northern Territory resident stream, is slightly less than what it is for the Subclass 190. Market salary must also be paid, so the company offering you the position must also be able to demonstrate that they're paying you a fair wage or salary for your role. If your employment is outside of your nominated occupation but in critical sectors like health, education, hospitality and construction, you might still qualify for Subclass 491, but that's only on a case-by-case basis. Now, for temporary visa holders, that's for example the 457 or the 482 visa holders, you'll need a letter of support from your current employer confirming their support for your application and understanding that you won't be tied to their business after the visa is granted. This is to ensure that anyone that has spent money in sponsoring you, because there's also expenses involved with the sponsorship process from the company, that they're willing to accept that, because once the visa is granted, you're no longer tied to that company or under their sponsorship. Now, the criteria for overseas applicants. Now, if anyone is overseas, we highly recommend choosing Northern Territory because there is a demand for certain occupations within certain industries, and also there is less competition, which means you have a higher chance of getting that invitation. So if you're applying for the Subclass 491, it is definitely possible for that, but not for the Subclass 190. Offshore applicants are generally nominated for the 491 because they will either have at least 2 years of post-qualification work experience in the nominated occupation within the last 5 years. So that means after you've completed your relevant degree, and that degree should be relevant to the occupation, you have at least 2 years of experience. Show a genuine commitment to living and working long-term in Northern Territory. Declare financial capacity to settle in Northern Territory, meaning you have the funds to be able to support yourself when you move initially. Now, let's look at 3 nomination streams for offshore applicants. First one is the priority occupation stream. You need a full migration skill assessment for an occupation that is on the Northern Territory migration occupation list, right? So this is for offshore migration occupations, and your occupation must be on here. And if it's in the priority sector, you're more than likely going to be invited because that's what they want to look at. You must meet any additional work requirements for your occupation. Then there's the Northern Territory family stream. You must have a family member in Northern Territory who's an Australian citizen, permanent resident, or holds a relevant visa, for example, the 491 or the 489, or of course, any of the permanent visas as well, like the 190, 186, etc. They must confirm in a statutory declaration that they will assist you when settling in Northern Territory. Sustained efforts to seek employment in Northern Territory must be demonstrated. That means you must show that you're applying for jobs and doing the research. Have a family member in Northern Territory who's usually resident in the Northern Territory as well and has been living there for at least 12 months. So that's the family member that's going to support you needs to have that evidence as well. And also have a family member in Northern Territory who is the applicant's eligible relative or their partner's eligible relative if their partner is also intending to apply for the same visa. Now, Northern Territory job offer stream is the 3rd stream for offshore applicants. You need a verifiable job offer in your nominated occupation from a business in Northern Territory that's been operating for at least 12 months. When you accept a nomination from the Northern Territory government, you're agreeing to certain conditions to show your commitment to the region, and here's what you need to know. You must live and work in Northern Territory for at least 3 years since the date that your visa was granted. This is especially for the Subclass 491. You must inform the Northern Territory government about the status of your visa application when it's granted and when you arrive in Northern Territory. You'll need to regularly provide current contact details to the Northern Territory government, and they may email you as well for this. You'll be expected to participate in surveys conducted by the Northern Territory government. If you're offered a Northern Territory nomination, you'll be required to sign and return a declaration form outlining these obligations. Migration Northern Territory considers factors like length of residency in Northern Territory, previous travel to Northern Territory, connections to the Northern Territory, such as family members being long-term residents, that's 12 months or more. Meeting these commitments is crucial for your successful settlement and visa process in Northern Territory. There's multiple streams. You got the Northern Territory graduates, you got the family stream where you have family members, or you're on a temporary visa like the 482 or the 457. And then for offshore applicants, there's 3 streams that we've covered. So make sure you check your criteria to be nominated and be able to support yourself in one of the particular occupations, but support yourself financially. There is a financial table outlined on the website for what you may need in terms of expenses or minimum value of net assets to demonstrate when migrating to Northern Territory. Make sure to research the cost of living in Northern Territory and ensure that you have the required funds for a smooth transition. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe or follow button and hit that bell icon for more notifications regarding Australian immigration. Northern Territory has quite a detailed process, so if you have any more comments or questions, please leave them below.